Jacob Beer is the narrator of most of the novel Fugitive Pieces by Anne Michaels. It starts with Jacob as just after he's escaped from the Nazis, murdering his parents in Poland because he was hiding in a closet. So his section of the novel follows him after Athos rescues him as he's growing up in both Greece and then once he moves to Canada and into his older years until he dies. Jacob really struggled to forget about his past and as his parents were murdered, and he didn't know what happened to his older sister Bella. And Jacob always questioned why. Why was he saved? Why was he saved by Athos? And why did he escape the fate of his family? Eventually he found closure. He didn't forget his past, but remembering it became easier. It wasn't so painful to remember, and it was easier to remember Bella because most of the book is hard for him to think of his sister. On page 48, Jacob says, "To survive was to escape fate, but if you escape your fate, whose life do you then step into?" Jacob wondering about the life he steps into is him questioning the why. Why was he spared, but his family wasn't? Jacob thought that he was supposed to die the day that his family did, and he struggled through most of his life until he met Michaela to move on from his past and from the Holocaust and the war. So he narrowly escaped the fate of his parents and his sister, but he still questioned why. A big part of him questioning why is not being able to move on from the pain of his past and remembering his past. Jacob struggled to let go of the war and the Holocaust and his parents dying and not knowing what happened to Bella. On page 31, Jacob is always constantly aware of Bella, even though she's no longer with him, and he always remembers things she says, like when she's playing the piano. But anyways, I hesitated in the doorway, that I was letting Bella enter ahead of me, making sure she was not left behind. I paused when I ate, singing a silent incantation, a bite for me, a bite for you, an extra bite for Bella. And then later on in the paragraph, I felt her presence everywhere, in daylight, in rooms I knew weren't empty. I felt her touch on my back, my shoulders, my hair. So Jacob's always really aware of his sister, and he thinks that she is always watching over him and that she's always with him no matter where he goes or where he is. It's really hard for Jacob to forget his sister, and this is a big part of why he struggles so much. What helps Jacob remember his past and remembers Bella is Athos and his library of poetry and his books. The library is kind of his getaway. It also helps him find who he is, not necessarily when he was younger, but as he grew older and he became a translator and a writer, and as he learned language, and language in general was a big part of him remembering. Reading and writing poetry is what helped Jacob move on and became who Jacob was language and writing. Writing and language never made him forget his past, but it helped lessen the pain of remembering. By learning English, Jacob thought that English could save him in a way and sort of hide his past. On page 101, it says, or he says, and later, when I began to write down the events of my childhood in a language foreign to their happening, it was a revelation. English could protect me, an alphabet without memory. Language was important to him because he thought it could protect what he had lost and protect him, and writing became an important part of his life. Ben, who is the narrator of the second part of the novel, he fell in love with Jacob's writing and his poetry, and he even goes to Ben's house, Michaela and Jacob's house in Greece to find his journals and his writing. It's hard for Jacob to let go of his past, and on page 144, it's about like Michaela and their marriage and how it failed. She never understands, thinks certainly that she's doing me good, returning me to the world, snatching me from the jaws of despair, rescuing me. And she is. But each time a memory or story slinks away, it takes more of it with me. A big, well, the main part of why their marriage failed was because Alex expected him to move on from his past like too fast for her, and she didn't understand him, and she didn't understand how Jacob embraced his past and how it was a permanent part of him that he didn't want to forget, because it was such a big part of what made Jacob Jacob. And Alex got tired of him being in his depressed and lonely state all the time, so she tried to take his past away from Jacob, and he didn't like that, and it caused tension in their marriage, and ultimately that's what made their marriage fail, because Jacob's past was such a part of who he was. Alex couldn't understand that, and she couldn't understand him. At first, it didn't bother Alex, but the tension grew so much that it made their marriage fail. She didn't help him move on from his pain or from remembering Bella. Jacob, he could hide his memories, but it was evident to everybody in his life, including Alex, that he still remembered, and it was the downfall to his marriage with Alex. The person who really saved Jacob was his second wife, Michaela, because she understood who he was. Though there was an age gap between the two, she understood who he was, and she really helped him move on from the pain of losing his family and losing his sister. And he finally moved on from Bella, and Michaela was the person who helped him not forget her, but find closure that his sister was gone and he could move on. And he died a happy man with Michaela because she was perfect for him, being that she was the one who understood him the most, other than Athos, and she could help him find closure of the war and the Holocaust and the death of his parents and not knowing what happened to his sister. So Jacob running from the Nazis was a really hard blow in his life, but he eventually learned to move on from that, and he lost a big part of who he was, and as he grew up, he became somebody different. He spoke Greek. He grew up in Greece, and he learned English. He moved to Canada. He lost who he was, and he didn't have the life of a Jewish boy, being that he never went to the synagogue, or he didn't have the same upbringing as Athos was Greek, and he wasn't Jewish. And when Jacob goes to the market, hearing the people speak Yiddish in the Greek or the Jewish part of the market, it made him feel sad, because he didn't have his past, because running away from the Nazis took a part of who he was, and that was why he questioned why all the time. Like, why was he spared but his family was taken, and they died in the Holocaust? They were a tragedy of the Holocaust. So Jacob, he struggled to live his life and find closure with what he had lost. And his wife Michaela, second wife Michaela, helped him move on and find closure, and become a Jacob that was different from the sad and depressed and lonely one. So yeah, I really like this book, and I don't know, guess because I like learning about the war, but I really enjoyed this book, and I was very intrigued by it and of Jacob's story. Even though no, it's not true, I was really intrigued by Jacob's life and how Ben fell in love with Jacob's writing, and it was kind of a little bit of an inspiring story that Jacob suffered such a terrible loss, and he was still able to move on, even though he questioned all the time why he survived, and there must have been a reason for his survival. So that's what helped him live, and Michaela helped him live his life.